Discover the incredible secrets of how 10,000 Edwardians transformed brutal winters into triumphs. Clara Reynolds shifted in her chair, her breath fogging the cold air in her dimly lit classroom. Outside, the biting wind howled among the snowdrifts that embraced her small town, a reflection of the chill settling deep in her bones. It wasn't just the weather that pressed down on her. The weight of uncertainty about her job and the fates of her students loomed larger, casting a shadow that made the winter seem endless. As a public school teacher in a place where dreams often froze before they took shape, Clara felt the familiar pull of a tug-of-war inside her. She longed to ignite a spark of love for learning in her students, just like her grandmother had with her stories of perseverance. Yet the school board's budget cuts had left her reeling, clinging to a job that felt less secure with each passing day. Speaking out against the stifling traditions, she feared not just for herself, but for kids who reminded her of her own childhood, filled with aspirations weighed down by circumstance. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Staring at the colorful student art decorating her classroom walls, Clara felt a spark of inspiration ignite within her. What if she created innovative educational programs designed to cultivate independent thinking? It was a thrilling thought, a refuge from the impending darkness. Yet, with excitement coursing through her veins, skepticism chased right behind it. What if her ideas met the same resistance as previous attempts at innovation? The local school board, filled with members rooted in conventional practices, felt like an insurmountable wall. A flicker of hope emerged when she sought counsel from Miss Langley, a wise retired teacher who saw promise where others could not. Their exchanges built Clara up, each shared idea a candle of warmth in her heart. But the tension began to simmer beneath the surface. The community she loved so dearly feared change. Clara could envision the faces of parents and fellow educators etched with concern about disrupting their traditions. Guilt gnawed at her resolve. What if her ambition came at the cost of the tight-knit fabric they held so close? As Clara prepared to present her ideas at the looming school board meeting, she felt the stirrings of doubt. Voices of support echoed, but equally loud were the whispers of caution, urging her to reconsider. Battling a racing mind and irregular breathing, she stood on a precipice, torn between fear of rejection and the potent need to advocate for her students. She could feel the icy grip of self-doubt wrap around her like the winter storm outside. The night of the meeting arrived with a heavy air of expectancy. As she looked around at the audience, shadows danced on many faces, some supportive, some judgmental. Before her stood the path that could change everything. With every word she spoke, Clara faced her deepest fears. Was she right to fight this battle? And when a young student unexpectedly shared how her teachings had made a difference in his life, Clara felt the weight of the moment press down, leaving her teetering on the edge of a decision that could alter the future, for her students, for herself, for the very community she cherished. What would she choose? Clara's pulse quickened as she finished her presentation. Each word had felt like a tentative step onto thin ice, uncertain but passionate. Yet when she finished, silence permeated the room. The weight of expectation pressed against her chest, and the sound of her own breathing felt thunderous. Unfamiliar anxiety washed over her, a sharp contrast to the conviction that had pushed her to speak out. As the school board members murmured to one another, Clara scanned the room, searching for a sign, any sign that her voice had resonated. There was Mr. Connors, his brow furrowed, clearly hesitant. Miss Smith was nodding, but Clara couldn't decipher if it was supportive or patronizing. And then there was the expression of the student who had so boldly shared his thoughts. His bright eyes shone with an unwavering trust that Clara had underestimated. "Questions?" the board president finally said, breaking the silence with a steely edge. Clara's heart raced as she prepared for the onslaught. This could make or break her budding initiative. "Are we really sure students are ready for these changes?" Mr. Connors began, his voice gravelly. "What evidence do you have that this approach will be beneficial? We've operated successfully under established methods for decades." His words felt like daggers aimed directly at her confidence. Established methods, Clara thought bitterly. How often had she witnessed the same tired practices stifling creativity and potential? What's successful if it leaves them unprepared for a world that is constantly evolving? She wondered, but the question lodged in her throat. "I believe in giving them the tools to think critically," Clara finally managed, each word fueled by every student who deserved better. "I've seen firsthand how engagement ignites passion. We have to evolve along with our students or risk leaving them behind." The murmurs in the audience shifted, some expressions softening. Yet Clara felt the residual discomfort hanging thick in the room, a palpable reminder that not everyone shared her vision. She could sense the conflicted sentiments, those who wanted change and those who feared it. Her breath hitched as she glanced at Miss Langley. The retired educator was smiling, her approval a faint glimmer, a beacon guiding Clara through the swirling doubts. "Let's vote," the board president declared, trying to regain control. Clara felt her stomach drop. The vote could either empower her vision or silence it permanently. The prospect both thrilled and terrified her. As hands rose, her heart thundered with each count, a flash of hope igniting in tandem with deep-rooted dread. One hand remained firmly down as others were raised, and Clara's gaze snapped toward Mr. Connors. The weight of his disapproval echoed in her mind. "4 in favor, 3 against," the board president announced, his voice striking a chord of relief and fear within her. Clara's heart raced, one step forward, but at what cost? The meeting adjourned, leaving her with the taste of triumph tinged with insecurity. She had begun what felt like a monumental shift, yet the gravity of her actions gnawed at her. What if the initiative unraveled? What if she couldn't meet the expectations born from her own ambition? The days following the meeting unfolded under a blanket of tension as Clara worked tirelessly to outline her ideas. She was filled with determination, but shadows of doubt often clouded her thoughts. Would the board truly support her? Could she inspire change in such a resistant environment? Driven by a desire to foster growth, Clara reached out beyond her immediate circle for allies, an informal network of innovative educators and parents who shared her aspirations. As she fostered these relationships, she discovered her ability to lead not just from authority, but from passion, and that realization brought her a renewed sense of purpose. But as Clara began to plan classes that encouraged a love for learning, she received a stark email. The school board had decided to review her proposal in more detail, raising questions she had anticipated but hoped to avoid. Standing at a crossroads again, Clara grappled with a new, daunting tension. How could she navigate the bureaucracy while nurturing her mission? It was clear that the fight was far from over. As Clara prepared for her next challenge, her determination sharpened. The looming chaos felt both invigorating and terrifying. After all, change seldom came without conflict. She had only just begun to unveil her potential. But would the very flaws she worried about become the foundation of her triumph? Or would they lead her to inevitable failure? As Clara contemplated these questions, the door creaked open. An unexpected visitor stepped in, and Clara's heart skipped a beat, anticipating yet another unexpected turn in her unfolding story. Clara's heart raced as the door opened. It was Miss Langley, who stepped in with a demeanor that combined both warmth and urgency. The retired educator's presence had always been a source of comfort for Clara, like a well-worn book with familiar pages. Yet today, beneath Miss Langley's smile, Clara sensed an undercurrent of gravity. "Clara, I received your email about the board's review. We need to prepare," Miss Langley said, her tone serious as she settled into the chair across from Clara. "You cannot underestimate the weight of these discussions." Clara nodded, the reality of the situation sinking in deeper. The initial acceptance felt like a dream, but now it was a looming specter. "I thought I knew what I was getting into," she admitted, the vulnerability creeping into her voice. The difficulty of inspiring change had never seemed so grand before. "But they're questioning everything." "Every challenge presents an opportunity," Miss Langley replied, her eyes sparkling with conviction. "This is your chance to refine your approach, to articulate your vision more clearly. You may need to anticipate their fears and address them head-on." "Anticipate their fears," Clara murmured, the words igniting a flicker of resolve within her. The thought of addressing not only their concerns, but transforming them into constructive dialogues felt daunting yet exhilarating. She was tired of fearing confrontation. It was time to embrace it. The plan began to form in her mind. Clara decided that she must gather concrete evidence to support her initiative, showcasing success stories from similar implementations elsewhere. "I'll pull together data and testimonials from my network. If they can see the success of this model emotionally and intellectually, it may shift their perspective," she asserted. Miss Langley smiled approvingly, but Clara detected a hint of caution in her expression. "That's a strong strategy, but remember, you'll also need to present it with clarity and confidence. Your passion is your greatest asset. Don't hide behind facts alone. Combine them with your vision." In that moment, Clara felt a surge of energy. The weight on her shoulders lifted slightly. She began to see the path as less of a burden and more of an adventurous challenge. Passion would draw people in, and data would solidify her claims. They were complementary, not conflicting. After a lively discussion, Clara's resolve solidified further. She set her sights on crafting a compelling presentation that blended data, anecdotal evidence, and her own personal story. She recalled how hands-on experiences had changed her own learning trajectory, and knew that the human element would resonate deeply with the board members. As she delved into research, late nights turned into small victories as each flash of inspiration morphed into a new portion of her presentation. The more she learned, the more confident she became. She felt herself evolving, unearthing the leader within one layer at a time. Yet, doubt whispered incessantly at the edges of her mind. What if she stumbled during the presentation? What if her passion wasn't enough to win over the skeptics? As she fought with these fears, a new idea struck her. She could invite a few trusted colleagues from her growing network to join her discussion, creating a coalition of voices advocating for change. The thought of standing before the board alongside fellow advocates began to seem like a powerful image. Clara visualized them all on stage, their collective energy merging into a force for transformation. Yet still, a nagging anxiety remained. What if the initiative failed, despite their efforts? Pushing the doubt aside, Clara moved forward with focus. She immersed herself in strategizing, balancing her emotional journey with pragmatic execution. Just as she anchored her thoughts to planning, another email notification pinged on her screen, an invitation for a private meeting with 2 board members. Clara's pulse quickened. This meeting could either be a lifeline or another source of tension. But she refused to let fear of the unknown dismantle her resolve. The thought of facing them both excited and terrified Clara. It was time to confront her fears, to step beyond the boundaries of doubt into a territory ripe with potential. If her ideas were to take root, she would need to embrace every moment of vulnerability as a stepping stone. As she readied herself for the impending meeting, a realization swept over her. Her journey was more than about gaining approval. It was about instilling a deeper change within her own narrative. There lies a strength she had yet to fully explore, a strength born not just of knowledge, but of experience and the courage to embrace uncertainty. Clara took a deep breath, preparing to step into what lay ahead. What awaited her on the other side of that meeting? Support or resistance? The realization that her advocacy was just beginning filled her with a thrilling yet daunting fire. The moment of truth loomed closer, and Clara was ready to face it. But would she emerge with the support she craved, or would her ambitious endeavor be met with another roadblock? Clara paced the small office, the air thick with anticipation. The meeting with the board members loomed larger than life, a defining moment that had the power to either bolster or disrupt her envisioned future. Each stride felt heavy with the weight of her thoughts, cementing the mix of excitement and trepidation washing over her. The clock on the wall ticked methodically, a reminder that time was fleeting. Clara grasped a folder, filled with carefully curated data and personal testimonies, but her hands trembled. Preparing meticulously had become her lifeline, yet she couldn't silence the doubts racing through her mind. What if it wasn't enough? With a steadying breath, she directed her thoughts inward. Clara reminded herself of the late nights spent reworking her presentation, fine-tuning every slide, every word. The vulnerability she felt was paralleled by a growing passion for her vision. She envisioned how she would intertwine heartfelt anecdotes with robust evidence, showing not just the facts, but illustrating the emotional resonance behind her ideas. As the minutes crawled closer to her appointment, she recalled Miss Langley's advice: combine passion with purpose. Those words began to resonate again, reigniting a flicker of determination. Clara had often underestimated her ability to connect with others emotionally, but this was her chance to transcend statistics and tell a story that mattered. Finally, it was time. She entered the conference room, the cold air sending a chill down her spine, but determination surged within. Seated across a long table were two board members, their expressions inscrutable. There was Mr. Harris, a longtime skeptic of innovative practices, and Miss Coleman, whose interest often shifted when passions clashed with pragmatism. Clara offered a sincere smile, her voice steady as she began. "Thank you for meeting with me today. I want to discuss how we can shift our educational approaches to better meet the needs of our students." Each word was as much a declaration as a plea, and as she spoke, she felt grounded by her purpose. Momentum built as Clara presented the evidence, weaving in personal stories from both her experiences and testimonials from colleagues who believed in her vision. The data hammered home the effectiveness of the change, but with every statistic came the heartbeat of her passion. Stories of students who had thrived under more engaging methodologies. She could see it in their reactions. Mr. Harris shifted slightly, pensively stroking his chin, while Miss Coleman's brow furrowed with concentration. As she neared the conclusion, Clara felt emboldened. This is more than an initiative. It's about transforming the way we inspire our students. We have the opportunity to create an environment that fosters growth and curiosity. But she had neglected a potential pitfall. How would they counter her optimism with skepticism? Mr. Harris leaned forward, eyebrows knitted together. "Clara, while your enthusiasm is commendable, I worry about the practicality of implementing such changes. What if these strategies fail to yield the anticipated results? The question hung in the air like a dense fog, testing her resolve. Clara swallowed hard, recalling the shadows of doubt that had haunted her late nights. This confrontation could either dismantle her hard work or propel it forward. "I understand the concerns," she replied, steadied by conviction. "However, I believe that innovation requires risk. We must be willing to explore uncharted territory, and my commitment to this vision means I'll be present every step of the way, ready to adapt based on feedback and outcomes." With every counterpoint, Clara felt the distinguishing line between hope and fear blurring. This single meeting had become not just a battle for her initiative, but a forging of her identity as a leader, not defined by acceptance or failure, but by a willingness to engage, to confront challenges head-on. After a robust exchange of ideas and reservations, Clara finished her presentation with renewed vigor, aware that this was only the beginning of an ongoing dialogue. She could feel the shift in the room. With every response, a partnership appeared possible, but only if she remained poised through the uncertainty. A sense of hope brewed within her, yet was marred by the lingering uncertainty surrounding the board's reaction. As she exited, a resolve hardened. Whether they welcomed her ideas or pushed back would shape her next steps. But Clara was determined to continue advocating for what she believed was necessary for real change, armed with unanswered questions and a vision she was unwilling to compromise. The next chapter awaited, filled with possibilities and resistance alike, as Clara pondered her next strategic move. Would her bold approach sway the dissenters, or would it ignite even greater conflict? Clara returned to her office, the door clicking shut behind her, sealing off the palpable tension of the boardroom. The echoes of her presentation still resonated in her ears, a mix of exhilaration and anxiety intertwining with each breath. She planted herself behind her desk, her fingers grazing the edges of the very folder that had carried her hopes into that intimidating space. The thrill of having spoken her truth dulled the immediate fears, yet doubts lingered in the recesses of her mind. How had she managed to face the board and present with such conviction? Was it merely the adrenaline, or did she truly possess the capacity for leadership she often questioned? These reflections propelled her into action rather than paralysis. She began jotting down her impressions, her weaknesses, her strengths. But she knew confrontation with Mr. Harris had been only a glimpse into the opposition she might face. For every supporter she envisioned, a skeptic lurked. She leaned back in her chair, considering her next steps. Clara understood that to navigate this complex landscape, she would need to bolster her arguments, addressing doubts before they magnified into barriers. Throughout the day, conversations with teachers filled her thoughts. Their direct experiences with students would serve as an invaluable resource, amplifying her message if she could weave their insights into a compelling narrative. Clara reached for her phone, dialing Lucy, a colleague who had long advocated for more innovative approaches within the classroom. "Lucy, I need your help. I'm planning my strategy moving forward after yesterday's meeting. Can we go through some of the feedback I received and build on that?" Clara's voice was laced with enthusiasm, but edged with veiled apprehension. As she spoke, a part of her felt lighter. Collaboration had always invigorated her. Lucy's vibrant energy crackled through the phone, her willingness infectious. "Absolutely. I've got a couple of ideas that might resonate. Let's brainstorm ways to not only bolster your argument, but to anticipate their concerns head-on." They spent the next few hours analyzing data, collecting anecdotes, and forming a narrative that painted a picture of possibility. Clara felt her own uncertainty ebb as Lucy's confidence ignited a spark in her. Perhaps she was not just advocating for change, she was spearheading a movement, and with each collaborative step, she noticed pieces of resilience she hadn't recognized in herself before. Amid their enthusiastic exchange, Clara felt a flicker of doubt, a nagging thought that coiled around the edges of her resolve. What if, after all this preparation, their efforts still fell flat? That moment pressed hard against her optimism, an uncomfortable truth she couldn't shake off. But as she listened to Lucy articulate the potential impacts of their proposals, Clara found herself shaking off that fear. The passion behind their work fueled her further. With ideas solidified and a clear plan forming, Clara's focus sharpened. Her prior fears were now overshadowed by a strategy that pooled the power of community with her individual vision. As she leaned into this newfound momentum, the notion of addressing the board didn't feel invasive. It transformed into an opportunity to amplify voices that resonated with her own belief in educational reform. Yet, that very thought ignited a different fear. What if the board members who had expressed skepticism pushed back harder against this collective energy? Clara felt the internal conflict stir. She was ready to embrace the accountability that came with leadership, but would it test her resolve and commitment in unforeseen ways? As dusk settled, Clara stared out the office window, the twilight blurring her surroundings. Her heart raced at the thought of the next meeting, knowing that the real challenge lay not in presenting, but in bracing herself for potential pushback that so often followed progress. With a heavy sigh and sifting through her emotions, Clara understood. Every triumph came with resistance. She had ignited a fire and now had to protect it against the winds that threatened to extinguish it. The room around her faded into shadows as she quietly prepared herself for what lay ahead. As she closed her notebook, a new query arose within her. How far was she willing to go to keep the momentum alive against skepticism? The looming battle for her vision had only just begun, and Clara's journey was no longer just about education, but about her own transformation into a leader unafraid of opposition. Would she emerge from this clash galvanized, or would this moment falter under pressure? The air in Clara's office felt charged the following morning, each passing moment tightening the knot in her stomach. Her mind raced as she flipped through pages of notes, her strategy meticulously outlined, her personal convictions neatly lined up for presentation. Yet, despite the preparation, every tick of the clock weighed heavier, reminding her of the confrontation that loomed. Driven by a sense of urgency, Clara stood and paced the confines of her small workspace. She could hear the echoes of her own doubts replaying in her mind. What if the board rejected her proposal outright? What if they ridiculed her vision for the students? She had gathered a compelling array of data and testimonials, yet the stakes felt infinitely high. Success was no longer about proving herself. It was about transforming the educational landscape for her students. With each step, she grasped at the threads of resolve that had begun to fray. Clara paused for a moment, taking a breath, grounding herself in the present. She reminded herself of the collaborative energy from yesterday. Her conversation with Lucy had invigorated her. "Focus on the message," she whispered to herself, remembering the driving purpose behind her initiative. As she squared her shoulders back, Clara envisioned the audience she would face. One by one, the faces of each board member crystallized in her mind, including Mr. Harris, whose skepticism still loomed as a shadow over her confidence. In that instant, Clara realized that she was not just representing a proposal. She had become the embodiment of change itself. Drawing on that realization, she gathered the materials she would bring with her to the meeting, each piece symbolizing her growth. With her notes secured, she stepped out of her office, embracing the energy of anticipation coursing through the hallways. Clara felt a spark. Her interactions, her commitment to education, and the passion she carried for her students were all part of this larger mission. The meeting room was stark and intimidating, yet she could see echoes of vibrant discussions she wished to ignite. As she prepared to present, Clara felt a familiar rush of adrenaline. But this time, it didn't just feel like fear, it felt like purpose. This was her time to challenge the status quo and vocalize a future brimming with potential. As the discussion began, Clara found her footing early on, articulating her points with a clarity that surprised even herself. With each statistic, each teacher's account of transformative moments with their students, she fed off the intrigued expressions that began to surface among her colleagues. However, it wasn't long before the room began to slip into familiar territory. As she introduced a key element of the proposal, an innovative curricular shift, Mr. Harris raised a hand, the gesture somehow both formal and dismissive. "Clara, you speak passionately, but do you really believe this is feasible? Our students are already struggling under the current demands." The tension snapped as the room held its breath, Clara's pulse racing once more. The worrisome thought flashed in her mind. Did she genuinely have what it took to counter him? For a brief moment, the doubt crept back in, darkening her voice. Yet, the memories of the late nights of preparation and brainstorming rallies washed over her, propelling her to confront the challenge head-on. "Sheer resolve will not change lives, Mr. Harris," she replied, forcing confidence into her tone. "What we do here today could redefine education for those who most need it. Isn't that worth the risk?" Clara's boldness surprised even her, raising the stakes not just for her proposal, but for her own journey into leadership. The murmurs in the room shifted, questions ignited around her, and she felt the momentum building again. But she braced for the next question, knowing that her greatest test was yet to come. If her vision ignited passion, would it ignite resistance as fiercely? As she prepared to answer, Clara felt the weight of her leadership transform into something that no longer paralyzed her, but pushed her forward. With the meeting still unfolding, a different dread began to seep in. Was this just the beginning of a long battle for acceptance? The path from here remained uncertain. Would her courage be enough to sustain her? Or would the board's resistance extinguish the fire she had dedicated herself to protect? Clara sat at the conference table, the weight of Mr. Harris's skepticism hanging in the air as palpable as the tension swirling around the room. The murmurs of her peers faded into a distant hum as she locked eyes with Mr. Harris, determined not to let his doubt derail her focus. Clara realized that this moment represented more than just a presentation. It was her chance to embody the vision she fought for. As her colleagues processed their thoughts, Clara seized the opportunity to deepen her argument. She shared a personal story, a moment from her classroom when a struggling student transformed under the right guidance. "When I see the spark in my students' eyes," she said, her voice stronger, "I know my approach works. This is about giving them a chance to thrive." The room fell silent again as Clara's passion hung in the air, an invitation to reconsider their preconceived notions. But as she continued, another thought pierced through her resolve. Was she really willing to fight this battle alone? The prospect of ongoing opposition loomed larger. As Mr. Harris steeled himself for his next response, Clara braced herself for a rebuke. Instead, he paused, allowing a moment of genuine contemplation that surprised everyone, her included. "We need to consider the budgets and resources," he finally said, his tone now unexpectedly measured. Clara took that as a small victory. "Absolutely, and I anticipate those concerns," she replied, her thoughts racing. "That's why I've analyzed what's possible within our current constraints. This shift can start small, and the return on investment, both financially and socially, will be monumental." Her confidence grew as she articulated a plan that blended costs with measurable outcomes. Each word she spoke felt like a brick laid down to build the foundation of her argument. With every passing minute, Clara felt the shift in the energy of the room. Peers nodded in understanding, intrigued by her dedication. Yet, lurking beneath the surface remained the persistent anxiety of Mr. Harris's initial reaction. After all, one voice could still sway the entire board. What if they decided her vision would simply add to their burdens rather than alleviate them? As the conversation swirled around her, she realized the importance of coalition building. Discussion shifted among her colleagues, echoing their fears and excitement, and a realization struck Clara. She needed allies within this critical moment. Her voice took on a different tone as she pivoted. What if we did a pilot program? This allows us to test the waters without fully committing to a complete overhaul. The murmurs grew once more, curiosity blooming where doubt had once dwelt. Clara saw faces light up, the glimmers of possibility igniting with them. What if they saw the potential along with her? The tide began to shift, and Clara's heart raced with exhilaration and trepidation. The battle was far from over, but she could feel the support beginning to coalesce. Then, suddenly, Mr. Harris interjected again. "But what's to say this will even work? We could end up throwing away our time and resources," he challenged, crossing his arms defensively. Clara felt the sting of his words again, but this time her pulse quickened with determination rather than fear. The time had come to confront his skepticism directly. "Isn't that the nature of innovation, Mr. Harris?" she countered. "Every progressive change carries risk. If we let fear determine our path, we will remain stagnant. Isn't the goal to strive for excellence, to give every student the best opportunity to succeed?" Amid the charged silence that followed her defiance, Clara felt a shifting weight in her chest. She had summoned the courage to stand against not just the doubt of others, but her own, signaling a deepening maturity in her professional development. Still, underneath her rising hope, doubt skittered along the edges of her consciousness. What if her proposal did fail? Would this be the moment that defined her, good or bad? The thought sent an electric shiver through her. As the meeting approached its climax, Clara focused on her breathing, letting the energy of the room wash over her. She needed to channel the momentum toward a decision, hers or theirs. Could she present a final push that could break down the wall Mr. Harris had erected? Little did she know, the next question would not just test her resolve, it would reveal a hidden strength she had yet to fully embrace. As tension mounted, Clara understood she was not just fighting for a proposal, but for the very essence of who she wanted to become. Would she rise to the challenge, or would she falter in this decisive moment? Clara's heart raced as she sensed the air shift around the table. Every face was a mirror of uncertainty and intrigue, an eclectic blend of educators who had spent years navigating bureaucratic waters. They were not yet her allies, but the seeds of persuasion she had sown were stirring a response. She could feel it in the subtle nods, the quiet exchanges of glances. They were waiting for something, an answer, perhaps, to the innate question that had driven her presentation to this critical juncture. "What if we recalibrated our expectations?" Clara proposed, her voice unwavering. "Instead of viewing this as a gamble, let's consider it an investment in our future. If we don't take this step now, we risk losing students who deserve better. They don't fit into rigid molds, and it's our duty to mold our approaches to fit them." The implications of her words echoed in the room, solidarity rippling beneath the surface tension. Clara could see the cogs turning, her colleagues beginning to mentally unpack their own biases about risk and innovation. Yet, Mr. Harris's stance remained a palpable barrier. His skepticism was a fortress, and to dismantle it required more than well-articulated arguments. It demanded vulnerability and authenticity. "Mr. Harris, may I ask you something?" Clara tilted her head slightly, her demeanor shifting from confrontational to inquisitive. "Why do you believe change is risky?" The room inhaled in unison, surprised at her directness. Clara felt a tremor in her hands as she glanced at her notepad, willing herself to maintain eye contact with Mr. Harris. She needed him to see the truth beneath her surface confidence, the same truth that had fueled her years of teaching. "It's cyclical," he finally responded, his defensive posture softening slightly. "We've tried new methods before, and while some flopped, others merely scratched the surface of what is needed. The memory of those failures linger." Clara considered his words. Every educator had lived through reform's broken promises, yet they also stood on the precipice of obligation. With respect, what if the reason those reforms didn't take root was not the methods themselves, but rather the lack of genuine buy-in from everyone involved? Authentic innovation starts with listening and collaboration. Clara breathed deeply, channeling her burgeoning resolve. She could feel her own fears being painted with a bolder brush. Would sharing her own vulnerabilities not just strengthen her credibility, but also showcase a different aspect of leadership, one rooted in shared experiences? "My own journey has not been without setbacks," she began, her voice steady. "I remember a year when I felt I had failed every student in my class. Yet that failure ignited a fire within me to discover new solutions, to dig deeper." Clara could see Mr. Harris shifting, the rigid lines of his features softening, if only minutely. The honesty in her words began to chip away at the doubt that surrounded him. Though their histories had cast shadows of cynicism, she dared to illuminate another path. "I believe what we're discussing here, the potential for lasting change, is far greater than one failure. Isn't it essential that we create a space where every student feels seen, heard, and valued?" The room was silent, her words hanging like a delicate thread connecting them all. But deep inside Clara, self-doubt flickered in the corners of her mind again. What if she had misjudged the situation? What if they still weren't ready to heed her call? Each heartbeat became a reminder of the risk she had chosen to embrace. As she scanned her colleagues, Clara saw something shift in their expressions. Mr. Harris raised an eyebrow, an unmistakable glimmer of contemplation mingling with apprehension. Would he be able to transcend his skepticism? Then another voice broke into the silence, a colleague she had admired for years but never quite connected with. "Clara, I think you're onto something here," they said, their resonance of support igniting a courageous flicker within Clara. The meeting was far from over, and Clara felt a newfound strength resonating through her, pulling her further into her purpose. But a question loomed larger than the moment itself. Would Clara be able to transform this flickering support into a unified front? Would she find the courage to unveil her blueprint for change and win them over completely? As Clara poised herself for the next phase of battle, she realized how significantly her growth hinged upon this pivotal moment. It was a dance between vulnerability and fortitude, and she was determined. In that moment, a glimmer of hope ignited in her core. Perhaps the courage she needed to summon could propel her even further than this meeting. The quest for a deeper understanding of herself and a vision that could inspire others was only just beginning. Would she seize this moment to advance her professional evolution, or would the remnants of fear hold her back from true transformation? Clara's pulse matched the rapid beat of her thoughts as she prepared for the next segment of the meeting. The supportive voice had acted like a match to a smoldering fire, one she had tended with both care and dread. The energy in the room crackled with potential, but with it came an undeniable weight of expectation, fostering an intricate blend of hope and trepidation. "Let's brainstorm then," Clara said, her sense of urgency rising alongside her adrenaline. "What would a successful collaboration look like in our classrooms? What kind of changes could we implement that would actually resonate with our students?" Silence filled the room again, but this time it was punctuated by quickened breaths and murmurs of reflection. Clara seized the moment, probing deeper into the minds of her colleagues. Conversation started to bubble up, plotting the symposium of ideas in her imagination. Yet she could still feel Mr. Harris's skepticism like a lingering fog. "Clara," he interjected, cutting through the hopeful chatter, "this is all very aspirational, but how do we measure success in such uncharted waters? How do we know it's working?" She leaned forward, the cusp of her dream for transformative education wavering with each word. "It's about creating benchmarks that matter and allowing real-time feedback from the students themselves. Let's engage them in the evaluation process, not just our peers." The room shifted again as expressions varied from intrigue to outright skepticism. Clara caught the eye of one of her colleagues, Judith, who had initially been critical of Clara's proposal. Now Judith seemed slightly more open, her brow relaxed just a touch, as if Clara had nudged a mental barrier. "Could we pilot a small program?" Judith suggested tentatively. "Let's gather some data without a full-scale commitment." Clara nodded eagerly. "Yes, starting small gives us room to breathe and the opportunity to adapt based on actual outcomes. We can present our findings to the broader faculty in just a few months, showing what works and what doesn't." She felt the temperature of the room shift yet again, and the subtle, cautious nods began to multiply. They were entering new territory, eyes narrowing as they contemplated actions instead of simply prognosticating risks. As her enthusiasm grew, so did her awareness of the stakes involved. Every passing idea carved a deeper outline of what this initiative could become. Clara needed to ensure that their hopes weren't eclipsed by doubt. She had to create a movement rather than a mere moment. "Okay, let's list some immediate action items," Clara proposed, directing the conversation forward. "What can we all agree to implement next week?" The responses ignited several lively discussions. Ideas mingled with enthusiasm. Some wanted to have student-led feedback sessions. Others suggested collaborative work groups among teachers. Clara became increasingly aware of her role as a conductor, orchestrating a chorus destined for harmony despite its occasional discord. But amidst the electric energy stimulating her colleagues, Clara's internal dialogue waged a war of incongruence. Was it too soon to celebrate? While momentum gathered, her mind churned with concern. What if the tides turned? What if Mr. Harris, emboldened by his past experiences, rallied support against her vision once again? "Tread carefully," whispered the voice of doubt in her head. But Clara pushed it aside, willing to flicker past the darkness, drawn to the light she saw reflected in her peers. The meeting continued to unfold, with conversations escalating into ideas fueling the room's energy. Each time she looked at Mr. Harris, she saw the battle between skepticism and reluctant acceptance waging in his eyes. Yet he hadn't spoken against her since the support had rallied. Perhaps he didn't yet know how to articulate his concerns. "Right now, we're focusing on collaboration," Clara declared, her voice clearer and more steadfast than ever. "That's our commitment moving forward. Together, we will learn, we will adapt." As the meeting reached its conclusion, Clara found a moment to breathe, the adrenaline receding enough to allow clarity. Yet a new realization weighed on her. Her journey was only beginning, with hurdles and confrontations lurking ahead. She couldn't shake the feeling that Mr. Harris would soon challenge her publicly, perhaps even in a way that could undermine her leadership. "Tread carefully," whispered the voice of doubt in her head, but Clara pushed it aside, willing to flicker past the darkness, drawn to the light she saw reflected in her peers. The meeting continued to unfold, with conversations escalating into ideas fueling the room's energy. Each time she looked at Mr. Harris, she saw the battle between skepticism and reluctant acceptance waging in his eyes. Yet he hadn't spoken against her since the support had rallied. Perhaps he didn't yet know how to articulate his concerns. "Right now, we're focusing on collaboration," Clara declared, her voice clearer and more steadfast than ever. "That's our commitment moving forward. Together, we will learn, we will adapt." As the meeting reached its conclusion, Clara found a moment to breathe, the adrenaline receding enough to allow clarity. Yet a new realization weighed on her. Her journey was only beginning, with hurdles and confrontations lurking ahead. She couldn't shake the feeling that Mr. Harris would soon challenge her publicly, perhaps even in a way that could undermine her leadership. Would she be able to stand firm when the pressure mounted? Could she confront him head-on when the temptation to retreat beckoned? Clara steeled herself. The real test of her resolve awaited beyond the optimistic energy of this meeting. If her vision was to manifest into something substantial, she had to prepare for the inevitable conflict. A confrontation not just with Mr. Harris, but with every shadow of doubt threatening to undermine her progress. The moment had transformed into a catalyst for her growth. Determined, she left the meeting with a wellspring of ideas, yet the provocative thought persisted. What revelations lay in wait for her in the fire of conflict ahead? Few days after the meeting, Clara felt herself on the precipice of a monumental shift. The initial excitement about her ideas had transformed into an unyielding drive. She dedicated herself to the groundwork of her initiative with unwavering resolve. Yet the anticipation twisted her insides as Mr. Harris's views remained at the forefront of her mind. He had voiced concerns that echoed the fears she had battled in silence. Though the meeting had ended positively, she was acutely aware that real progress would require more than momentum. It would demand sincere acknowledgement of the obstacles they faced. In her classroom, Clara shifted focus. It was time to engage her students in the change she envisioned. As she introduced curriculum modifications, the energy in her classroom began to morph. Students delved passionately into projects using critical thinking, their curiosity igniting like flames. Clara nurtured their interest and unveiled the engagement methods she had always dreamt of implementing. The students' reactions were electric, their excitement palpable. As they tackled complex issues, Clara found herself thriving in their joy. She knew she was on to something transformative, not just for her students, but for herself. The barriers of self-doubt crumbled further with each passing day, and she basked in the glow of their growth. Yet self-awareness stirred an underlying tension. If her students evolved positively and visibly thrived, would Mr. Harris oppose her firmly held convictions? This looming dread turned into a question that pressed on her heart. Would he attempt to stifle the burgeoning success she had cultivated? Clara resolved to confront those uncertainties head-on, preparing her next move strategically. Summoning the courage she had honed, Clara reached out to Mr. Harris to discuss her classroom observations. "Can we meet to reflect on initial student outcomes?" she suggested, eager to reconcile their differing perspectives. His initial acceptance surprised her. The conversation cemented her commitment to transparency. Her success needed endorsement, and she would be the harbinger of that recognition. The days leading to the meeting were fraught with nerves, yet Clara covered every detail in her presentation. Evaluation data, student feedback, and compelling narratives of learner growth. She laced her findings with enthusiasm, but she also knew she had to be prepared for any counterpoints. When the day arrived, Clara walked into Mr. Harris's office with her portfolio in hand. Their discussion felt like walking a tightrope. As she presented findings, Mr. Harris's stoic demeanor perplexed her. Rather than dismissing her progress, he absorbed her enthusiasm with careful consideration, nodding occasionally. "I must admit," he said, his tone shifting, "the student's engagement stands out. It's commendable." The sincerity of his observation took Clara by surprise. "But are we ready to take this to the broader board?" "Absolutely," Clara replied, her voice steady. "I'm aware of the risks, but the strides we've made deserve recognition. Together, we can win the board's support." That moment of connection became a turning point in Clara's journey. As the two collaborated on strategies addressing the board's potential apprehensions, Clara felt her confidence solidify. The intensity required to advocate for transformative change began to feel less daunting and more exhilarating. With Mr. Harris on board, they sculpted a cohesive presentation that addressed the very fears that had clouded their past conversations. In the days leading up to the board meeting, Clara worked tirelessly. She merged passion with evidence, every slide reflecting both the students' progress and the value of collaboration. Butterflies danced in her stomach, but she now held a steadfast belief in her journey. Inevitably, she left no potential moment unprepared. When the board meeting day arrived, Clara stood alongside Mr. Harris, confidently addressing their colleagues. Each statistic she presented became a testament to the students' unfoldings, tangible evidence of capability igniting change. Yet it was Mr. Harris's newfound support that turned the tides. "I had my reservations," he declared forthrightly, "but seeing the engagement from students who simply needed different avenues to learn makes me reflect on what we can accomplish together." For the first time, Clara genuinely believed she could usher in a new era, one rooted in support, understanding, and genuine advocacy. The board members nodded in agreement, deliberations rippling in the air. As hearts raced, Mr. Harris introduced the motion to adopt the curriculum shift, and Clara realized she was at the zenith, a conjunction of personal and professional triumph. Crossing each hurdle had developed resilience in both her professional identity and her self-belief. The final vote passed overwhelmingly. Clara's proposal transformed from an uncertain dream into a concrete undertaking, one that would evolve the educational experience for future students. The room erupted in applause, affirming her growth and the collaborative spirit that it had taken to reach this moment. With every challenge endured and every fear confronted, Clara stepped into her role with solid confidence. She had transformed doubt into determination and hesitance into hope. As she soaked in the validation of her growth and newfound recognition, Clara smiled. She had conquered the tumultuous path, becoming a leader who would champion her students fiercely and fearlessly. No longer just a teacher in a struggling system, Clara emerged as a trusted innovator, her mission clear, her resolve unwavering. She had proven to herself and to her community that transformation begins with one person daring to envision the change they wish to see. This is your moment to support an empowering story of personal transformation. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss future exclusive emotional journeys. Leave a like now to fuel our community and feed the algorithm. Your support truly makes a difference. Make sure to comment below your thoughts and theories about Clara's journey. Let's connect over our passion for overcoming challenges. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness the power of resilience and personal growth. Only true fans of transformation understand the value of this message, and your voice can inspire even more change.